But first, rather provocatively, I'm going to start off by asking if islamophobia is the acceptable face of racism. As you're aware, there have been rioting since last Sunday night. Last night it was in Sunderland, and LBC's reporter Emily Craigie was there. Good morning to you, Emily.
Good morning.
What took place last night?
Yeah, I mean, standing here now in Sunderland, it's hard to believe that this was the same place that was a site of real disorder here last night. I was standing in the same spot yesterday and I could see an overturned car torched, a huge plume of smoke coming from that, bottles being launched as missiles towards riot police protected by their shields. The sounds of smashing glass was a real constant, and rioters were also screaming at officers. But now, the clean-up is underway. The remains of the torched car remain, but the glass is slowly starting to be swept up. And we've heard from the North East Mayor, Kim McGuinness, who was appalled by what she witnessed on the streets last night.
They've used the murder of 3 beautiful girls in Southport as an excuse to go out on the streets and riot in their own city. They've looted shops, they've frightened families, and they've attacked the police officers who were there to keep us safe, and it is completely unacceptable. They do not represent the views of Sunderland or of our region. We're a friendly and welcoming place. That's what we're known for, and these people will not win with their violence and their anger and their hatred.
Now, rioters also set fire to a city centre police office, and there was also a standoff between police and protesters outside a mosque on Sunderland St Mark's Road. Now, we know 8 people have been arrested following last night's disorder, and 3 police officers were taken to hospital. The force said they were subjected to serious violence on the streets of Sunderland last night and said that people will be dealt with robustly. Now, Sunderland Central MP Lewis Atkinson said he was appalled by the violent scenes, which he described as criminal thuggery. And as I mentioned, the clean-up operation is underway, with the first people here out with their brushes. Lots of people in Sunderland tops have just arrived. I can see they're looking at the car and sweeping up around that. So hopefully what we'll see now is a community coming together and showing a different side to the city today.
Thank you for that, Emily. So, is Islamophobia the acceptable face of racism? Let me immediately qualify acceptable. Acceptable to many politicians, to newspaper editors who've done next to nothing to address the hate, and in many cases have deliberately and consciously fanned the flames of that hate. I mean, the brief for Keir Starmer's new violent disruption unit includes special provisions for police protection around mosques. Isn't that an admission that Islamophobia has taken root in this country? And how might that have happened, ladies and gentlemen? Because in my opinion, any country that needs its government to protect places of worship has failed that particular religion. And when I was at school back in the Middle Ages, I was taught that Elizabethan Britain was so successful because it's when Britons were tolerant of people of other faith. And now some self-styled true Brits appear to have no tolerance at all, blind to reason, after filling their heads with lies on social media, their bellies with strong lager. And listen, there's always going to be far-right activity in a democracy, and in the UK, like many other countries, it rises and falls like the tide. At the end of the 70s, early 80s, the tide was high. It receded during the 90s, noughties, only to come flooding back again in the last decade. And I'd suggest it started rising again around Brexit, which, aside from leaving every household in the country £1,000 poorer, of course, saw Farage's mob use a picture of non-EU migrants under the headline "Breaking Point" to make the case for leaving the EU. Literally 2 lies on one poster. Thugs hijacking grief is how the Daily Mail describes last night's disorder in Sunderland, but it follows that with a sub-headline that reads, "But Kemi says we can't ignore tensions." This is the same Kemi Badenoch who's on the front page of the Telegraph today, complaining about the deafening silence we've had about immigration. Sorry, I thought we talked about nothing else for the last 10 years, to the detriment of just about every Whitehall department. Now, there are tensions, I won't deny it. Many reasonably minded folk might conclude they've been stoked non-stop for the last 10 years by a bunch of self-serving politicians on the right, the likes of Kemi Badenoch, Braverman, Jenrick, Priti Patel, who helped the Tory party record its worst election result in history. And that terrible result, you would think, would serve as a reminder to the Conservative Party that us Brits are a broadly reasonable, decent bunch who don't like racist thugs attacking our police. the wishy-washy way the Tories dealt with their most recent Islamophobia scandals that saw everyone from Lee Anderson to Suella Braverman spout conspiracy theory lies about Islamists running the country, controlling the London mayor. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden, the man charged with dealing with the lies, goes on TV and says, well, I don't believe Lee Anderson said those remarks intending to be Islamophobic. I mean, what kind of message does that send out? Our PM of Indian heritage, do you remember when the Reform candidate used the P word against him? He looked visibly shocked when it was about him, but he did nothing when the Tories were taking millions from Frank Hester, who said that he wanted Diane Abbott shot because she made him hate black women. Now, Sayeeda Warsi, she has done a fantastic job, a Tory peer, done a fantastic job of criticising her own party's take on Islam. She says, if you can't call racism, racism, if you can't call anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, and if you can't call Islamophobia, Islamophobia, how are we going to fix it? Fix it. I suspect that Kemi Badenoch's view that we need to have a renewed conversation may be appealing to some of you, but the idea that we've been living in silence, not talking about this, seems literally bizarre to me. As I say again, it feels like we've talked about nothing else. Love to hear your thoughts. 0345 6060 973. Is Islamophobia the acceptable face of racism? What a pitiful question to be asking this Saturday morning. Well, I'm going to turn first for guidance to a former Imam of the Southport Mosque. Soyful Alam is joining me now. Morning, Soyful.
Good morning, Matthew.
Where do we start? Your community is under attack in all corners once again, and it seems to me, a former Christian, that the Islamic community of Britain has been under attack for at least 10 years.
Yeah, it's hard to make actually a sense of all this. Firstly, the sad thing is that barely a week has passed since the heinous crime that took place in Southport, and the fact that the focus has shifted from the actual crime to this is the sad part. It's still, we have parents, families still grieving, but unfortunately, the attention has shifted totally to things which really we should not be talking about at this time in particular. It's just it's hard to make sense of all this. The question, you're posing to everybody today, is Islamophobia accepted? I think you referred to some incidents, recent incidents, where, first of all, do we have the government, of all people, didn't seem to have a definition of Islamophobia, and after certain comments were made by a certain sitting MP regarding the London mayor, don't think from the Prime Minister to all his MPs, nobody was able to answer the question.
No, they weren't.
His comment.
No. I've been around a long time doing journalism, and I was genuinely shocked by that particular episode.
Yeah, I remember your colleague Nick Ferrari actually having to cut short an interview with an MP because he couldn't answer the question, even after being asked the question about 3-4 times. Were the comments Islamophobic or not? I think the blanket answer was they were wrong, but nobody I think touched on the fact that they had an element of racism or Islamophobia.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt. Do you think Keir Starmer was correct to name the far right? You see, we have a broad political range of opinions. Some people say, that was the wrong thing to do because not everybody on the riots is demonstrable or provable to be far right. But Starmer has won praise from veteran anti-racism campaigners like Peter Hain and Margaret Hodge for saying it is the far right that's doing this.
The authorities, they would know better, those who are monitoring the situation or situations around the country, as to who exactly is behind the disturbances. But, it's hard. It would be wrong really at this point, where only a few days, it's only been a couple of days, to point a finger at a particular group that would be, I think, incorrect, and I think it wouldn't really help anybody.
What would help, Soyful? What would make a difference? How do we turn this around?
I mean, I think such a narrative has been created. I mean, if you look at, the question is, a crime was committed, a heinous crime in Southport, and then you wonder, okay, why on earth are people attacking a mosque? Where's the connection between somebody committing a crime and a mosque? Why? I mean, I think the best people to ask would be the people who were there attacking a mosque. I think if they could at least clarify as to, okay, why were they attacking a mosque? I mean, what was the reason behind? We hear from certain media outlets, they're angry. They're angry with the government, they're angry with two-tier policing, they're angry with not being listened to. Okay, but why attack? Why are they not attacking Tesco's, or why? I mean, has, for example, mosque been targeted? Chosen specifically, especially. I mean, in Southport, that's the only mosque in the whole region between Preston and Liverpool. There is no other Islamic building. But that was specifically, people came specifically to gather in that location to target that specific building. So my question is, I mean, why was the mosque targeted? I think overall the narrative that has been created is such that like as soon as the crime was committed, straight away the focus was turned to Muslims and Islam, and
I've been pointed to various websites. I think one of them, Channel 3, I think it was called, was viewed by more than 2 million hits immediately after the killings. It's a shadowy organisation purportedly based in the United States that, when it first came to light, was running dodgy Russian videos about men in cars. It's there are definitely dark actors out there that are meddling and playing on that hate, and it's. I just respect the fact, Soyful, that you are maintaining a dignified approach to this, and quite rightly remain focused on the deaths of those 3 little girls and all the other people, of course, that have been injured. And so, Soyful, thank you for joining us this morning. Soyful Alam.